All right, welcome back to Kevin Show Work. Again, we're showing work so you do not get tricked. We're doing PR12, questions 12 through 22. All right, first question here is a transition word, right? Again, I'd like for you to write it all out while you're still doing this as a practice, right? If you have a hard time reading my handwriting, good luck. But hopefully my explanation will help. All right, so when it's a transition, we're gonna look at the two things, right, that are in some relation to each other. Because the because here comes at the beginning of the sentence, we can almost do all the transition within the sentence. All right, so here, because we may take it for granted now, okay, take it for granted now, that modes of transportation can make it over or through just about any obstacle. Okay, so what are we taking granted now is that they can make it over or through any obstacle, right? The ease to move is in fact relatively new. Here, it's showing that it can make it over and the ease is new, right? Now, this is new, right? Which means it used to be, because you're taking it for granted, it used to be not as easy. It is a contrast here, right? Ease should be a big clue. New and take it for granted now should be a big clue. The only contrast here is C, while. 13, okay. The ease to move sounds okay, right? But here, we're gonna do some kind of parallel thinking here, right? Because we may, or while we may take it for granted now that various modes of transportation can make it over through just about any natural obstacle, the ease to move, here, what are we taking granted now? The modes of transportation, right? What is new? It has to match with this guy. It is parallel. So modes of transportation, ease of movement. C. Okay, number 14. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence, right? So if we look here at the beginning, after the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, the U.S. approximately doubled in size, adding what is now about the middle third of U.S. territory, right? They added middle third of U.S. territory. What does this talk about? Additionally, the new territory provided great resource, including fertile farmlands and seemingly endless Mississippi River. So these are all benefits that this thing provided. When we consider doing adding, we always also look at the following sentence, and here it says there was just one problem. If there is a problem, right, it has to be a contrast to something maybe a positive before, right? Here it just says it doubled in size, right? What was this problem? Journeys over the Appalachian in the north could make travel to the further west more trouble than it was worth, right? But here, if it's talking about a problem, there is a contrast, right? Here, there's actually a benefit. So it actually makes sense that they would talk about a problem after a benefit, right? Even if this doesn't make it seem like this is related per se, is that they're talking about a problem, and in the previous sentence, they're talking about adding new territory, which is what this does, right? And it talks about great resources and fertile farmlands. The only answer choice that addresses both the previous sentence and the sentence after is A, because it talks about positive attributes and talks about a contrast. Let's go to number 15. Okay, by the 1840s, right? Anytime you have like a prepositional phrase like this and there's a subject right after it, you usually use a comma. By the 1840s, comma, the population, which is the subject, had expanded. What had expanded? The population. So you know that had is the verb here, right? And you know that there should be no comma between the subject and verb, unless there are two commas in which a modifier is in between, right? So if we look for that, we know this doesn't belong because a colon is only there for a list or to connect two ideas, especially when the second idea clarifies the first one. We know here that in D, this comma is wrong as well. What did the population do? It had expanded. This is all part of the verb. A comma should not separate a verb. 16. Which choice best supports the main point of the paragraph? All right, if we look here, right, the main point of this is that horses and wagons were effective means of transporting goods across short distances, right? So they're good for carrying things across short distances. But, so we're looking for a contrast. These became unreliable when faced with mountains and inhospitable conditions. Just thinking about it, right? Horses and wagons, they're not going to have a good time going through mountains and inhospitable conditions. So A actually looks good, right? So actually the answer is A, but let's go over the other ones just to make sure. B, it talks about how not everyone could afford to keep a horse or a wagon. Here it's talking about effective means of transporting goods, not talking about cost, so we can get rid of afford. C is talking about how many Americans during this time were not even aware that there were such vast territories. Are we talking about other Americans, and are we talking about how they were not aware of vast territories? No, all this is wrong. This is one of those that you should have been like, it's not even in the passage, so we can cross it out easily. D, there were a few places to sleep and water one's horses on the journey. That almost sounds true, right? Because it's saying it's effective means of transporting goods, but there's a contrast, and it's like, oh, this seems like a difficulty. But is it talking about places to sleep? No, it's talking about effective means of transporting. How can it be difficult to transport, right? And it's not talking about places. So we can cross this out as well, right? Talking about what's going to affect the means of transporting. It's going to be mountains and inhospitable conditions. 17. After all, the new Americans had been trading with their English counterparts, right? Whose counterparts? Their. So we need a possessive here. The only one that shows that is B. All right, let's go to number 18. Linking North America and Europe was simple, yada, 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 and it always goes down to number 18 where it says the most treacherous parts, right? The lakes would allow boats to avoid the most treacherous parts. What parts? Mountain range, right? Treacherous means hazardous. Okay, is it hassling? Is it gonna bug you, annoy you? Or is it gonna try to ask you for a cheaper price? No, right? Prevaricating, that's to speak in like an evasive way, right? No. Is it annoying? Are mountain ranges annoying? No, people are annoying, right? So we can get rid of all this. It is A. 19. Any ship that could access these places by getting there, right? Access these places by getting there is the same thing, okay? It is just another paraphrase of the same thing. What about by way of getting to it? It's the same thing as access these places, right? Access these places literally means, can I get there? In the process of getting, it's similar as well, right? So we can actually delete it because it's redundant. Number 20. The missing link came from what a man named George Washington called America's Mediterranean. the Great Lakes. George Washington, we already know from the name that he is a man. We already also know, because we know history, that this is a man. This is not some random George Washington that somebody named, you know, a woman with a male name, right? This is redundant here. Again, it's redundant. It said something like a student named George Washington or a carpenter named George Washington. That would actually be something that we would actually learn something more about. Here we do not. So it's redundant. We can say D and delete it. Number 21. To make this paragraph most logical, sentence 5 should be, so if we look at sentence 5, it talks about the missing link, right? And what is this missing link? It came from what a man named George Washington called America's Mediterranean, the Great Lakes. So he called something the Great Lakes. This is a specific name, right? And anytime you see a specific name, you want to see if it's referenced somewhere else. George Washington is also a specific name, so we can also look for that. If we look, okay, line 2, it says the lakes. Which lakes, right? Well, we know it's the Great Lakes, right? So if it's something specific, it has to come something before it is generalized, right? So it has to come before sentence 2. B is the correct answer. Number 22. This man-made waterway, having dug by workers and horses without yada yada yada, right? There's all this like commas and right, and is this comma the right thing? Because according to the thing, there's all these commas and it's changing what's after it. So first, let's look for, anytime you see a underline with 2 words and a comma in between, or a few words with a comma in between, look for the subject and verb. So here, this man-made waterway, that's the subject. What did this waterway do? It stretched approximately 363 miles. So everything between these commas, they are a modifier, right? Describing this waterway, right? And what did this waterway do? Was it having dug? That sounds kind of weird, right? Waterway having dug? No, no, no. What was this waterway doing? It was dug by workers and horses, right? D here is the only one that makes sense. If you have it was, that's another subject and verb in the modifier. That makes no sense, right? Is the waterway digging? No. It was dug by, right? It's in the past tense. All right, I hope this helped. Hopefully you guys don't make silly errors.